Would you say that you are mentally strong? In my experience, a lot of guys overestimate their ability to endure discomfort, stress, and pain with power and resourcefulness. Now, I see a lot of guys grit their teeth and white knuckle through pain and stress, but hardly operating from a place of power. This is why too many men end up drinking too much, eating too much, watching too much porn, running away from conflict, especially from their significant others, and then become workaholics to distract themselves from the things that are stressing them out and providing discomfort and pain. So Brian and I decided to do an entire podcast on this called 5 Practices to Make You a Mentally Tougher Man. And we created a 1-page PDF with those 5 challenging practices that you can implement in your daily life to build your capacity for mental and emotional toughness, to help deal with adversity, and to make you a much stronger, more trustworthy man. Go to doinnerwork.com/5 practices. That's the number 5 and practices, all one word, doinnerwork.com/5 practices to download the PDF and to start training better today. Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Man Amongst Men podcast.
This is the second installment of a 2-part series on how to design the next decade of your life. If the next decade of your life is going to consist of 10 of the most meaningful, fulfilling, prosperous, energizing, adventurous, relationship-rich, purpose-driven years of your life, then how would it unfold? What experiences would you have? Are you on track to live those 10 years doing what you are doing right now? What relationships would you need to forge and deepen? What relationships would you need to leave behind? What skill sets would you want to develop? And these are the big questions that oftentimes we do not allocate the proper amount of time and intention to think about deeply enough, and that's how we end up drifting off into the future. And I record this after having just completed running a 3-day women's retreat here in New York City for a small group of senior VP women from financial services. These are the cream of the crop, top of their profession. And even they had their minds blown around how many areas of their lives they were drifting versus intentionally designing a future they couldn't wait to live into. Now, if you have not listened to installment number 1 of this conversation, I encourage you to go back to episode number 34, How to Design the Next Decade of Your Life, part 1. Because as Maya Angelou once said, you cannot really know where you are going until you know where you've been. And so in part 1, we actually take you back in time, looking at the last 10 years of your life so you can get a real sense of appreciation for how much can go down in a decade's period of time, even when you are not intentionally designing your life. And paradoxically, you can also start to get an appreciation for how little can change in certain areas of your life when you do not bring intentionality. And for some of you, that could be about your health. That could also be about your intimate relationships. That could be about financial struggles that you've never really seemed to overcome. That could be about not connecting to and living your purpose. And by going back in time and recognizing the patterns, you can start to get a real appreciation for how much potential is on the horizon for the next 10 years of your life. So listen to that first. And in today's conversation, Brian and I spend the first 20 minutes or so priming your pump for why this matters, why having an intentional design about the next 10 years of your life matters. And the second half of the episode is a guided meditation that will really allow you to envision and dream and feel into a decade that you cannot wait to live into. Enjoy the episode.
Well, Dominic, today we're here recording on a Friday, but there's another day I want to talk about. It's Sunday. And I don't know if you've ever heard of a term called the Sunday Scaries.
Not only have I heard of the term Sunday Scaries, I used to regularly live and experience
You're a hardcore subscriber of the Sunday Scaries.
And yeah, like not by my own accord, it just kind of happened to me.
If you don't know what the Sunday Scaries are, it's that moment. It usually starts around 8 p.m. on Sunday. And it's the place where your weekend is starting to meet up with Monday.
Yeah.
And maybe you've had a rough weekend. Maybe you drank too much. Maybe you didn't get done the things that you wanted to get done. But it's where Sunday meets anxiety, meets the work week. And you start to ask yourself those existential questions of like, did I do enough? Am I doing enough in life? Am I too old to accomplish my dreams and hopes? Like, what am I doing here right now? How did I get here? What happened to the last 10 years of my life? Why are my thoughts yelling at me? Right? These are the symptoms of the Sunday Scaries.
Yeah, that shit that gets out of control, spirals out of control very quickly. Usually it just starts with like a little bit of a nebulous panic. I remember doing a damn good job of stuffing it down. Like the reality of my life, I tried to keep away from my weekends. And then on Sunday, I would wake up, if it was during football season, I would watch 9 hours of football, eat chicken parm delivery.
And anything to not address those questions.
Correct.
To avoid those questions at all costs.
Correct.
And where it becomes amplified, where that voice becomes really loud is you can do that while watching football, you can numb it out. But when you crawl into bed on a Sunday night,
yeah, TV's off and it's quiet, all of a sudden then those voices and those questions become really, really loud. And for me, Dominic, it wasn't just on Sunday nights. I had this on Monday nights and Tuesday nights and Wednesday nights, and maybe it was amplified on Sundays. But yeah, these are the questions that we really like to avoid because they could be uncomfortable to actually answer. And the way I see that show up, the Sunday Scaries in men that are in their 40s and 50s, it's less about that like acute panic. Sometimes that happens, but that acute panic that we just described is different. What it shows up as is this procrastination of going to sleep. Like guys will tell me about this in their 40s and 50s. They'll just keep watching the next Netflix show, they'll read, they'll work a little later just so they can avoid that feeling, just to put off having to wake up again the next day. And then they end up with only 4 hours of sleep and they're tired. Yeah. That is like their way of kind of denying the reality of the week is starting again.
And I'm not quite 40 yet, but when we talked about our nighttime routine, you asked me a very pertinent question. Is that the right word, pertinent?
That depends on the following part of...
Great, got it. The pertinent question that you asked me was... Brian, how often do you pass out when you go to bed versus how often do you just go to bed? You put yourself to bed.
Right.
And the pass out is what you're describing.
That's right.
I consider myself an overachiever because I'm not 40 yet and I'm still doing that. And it probably stemmed from partly trying to avoid these questions that pop up.
Yeah, it's actually kind of a sophisticated technique to avoid that feeling. And so the reason why those feelings come up is oftentimes because we have buried these deeper questions that you started to pose. And because this is the second part of our 2-part series on designing the next decade of your life. Specifically, if the next decade of your life was going to be the most fulfilling, meaningful, adventurous, exciting, energizing, purpose-driven decade of your life, then what experiences would you have?
So in that way, the Sunday Scaries, or these questions that we start asking ourselves, are actually an opportunity, a calling for change.
Correct.
A calling for identification, as opposed to just waking up on Monday and not worrying about that until the next week or the next night or what have you.
Yeah.
And fun fact, Dominic, just guess what day and time of day America has the most amount of heart attacks.
Would it be Sunday evening at 8 p.m.?
It would not, but it would be Monday morning because those questions probably weren't addressed.
No shit.
Now we're jumping into the workday. So Monday mornings, far and away, have the most amount of heart attacks.
No shit. Well, this podcast is treating that condition right now. One of the problems that my clients bring to me all the time is that these goals that they've set out years before, they've accomplished. They've hit their $1 million mark, or they've doubled the size of their business, or they've gotten married, they've had the kids. Like, these are the goals that they set. They've achieved them and they still feel discontent.
Yeah, so it's fair to say that they're not just drifting. They're not doing things aimlessly. They do have goals. It just so happens that when they accomplish those goals, let's say 10 years later, they feel unfulfilled. They feel like they haven't got to where they want to be.
And they're confused as hell because it's like, I went out, I aligned all of my energies around getting this thing. They've been very good at it. And it's like, now that I have it, I'm unsatisfied. And what they end up typically doing is then just doubling down on. It's like, oh, well, if I wanted to make $1 million and I made $1 million, I'm going to go make $2 million because maybe that then will make me happy.
more chase, more everything.
But have twice as many kids. I'm going to
have a horde of kids.
Right. Instead of running a triathlon, I'm going to run an Ironman. It's like everything's got to get more bigger because that is the belief that's going to make them feel better. And where they fall into the trap, where I certainly fell into the trap for most of my life, is it's not about the goal itself. It's about the feeling that we are after, that we think that achieving that goal will give us.
Right. The actual thing that we want in any of these goals is often an emotion, a feeling.
Yes.
Right. $2 million. What is that? That's going to give me freedom to go experience things like travel, to go experience developing new skills. Maybe it's go learn how to play a guitar and have the time and the freedom to go about doing that.
Yeah. And here's one that most people don't think about is if I make $2 million, then that voice in my head that's telling me you're not doing enough will finally go away. Exactly. And what ends up happening is when you make your $2 million, the voice says, well, why aren't you making 4? And then when you make 4, right, it's like it's just never ending. And so those are the things that we want really to get you starting thinking about, to get you clear on, because if you continue to do the way that you have up until this point, then you're going to continue to feel that discontent going forward into the future.
And there's a lot of freedom in this too. So if we identify the end goal of what we want, the actual thing we want, the feeling,
as the emotion versus the thing itself,
fulfillment, love, freedom, connection, right? All these things, then the path on how to get there is infinite. And our life becomes very exciting because we know what we actually want and we can go about doing that in different ways along the way.
That's really important. So like you said, the paths there are infinite. So for example, the way that I can go and get freedom or the peace of mind, the way I can go get power, I may have an idea of how to get there that when I start testing it, it may not work, and then I can course correct it very quickly. But if I've defined I need to make $2 million as like this rigid thing that's going to allow me to feel peace of mind and power, then my paths are much more limited. And then I have to go and maybe work harder. I have to go and take a second job. I have to go and take on clients that I don't want, like that kind of thing. And those paths become restrictive. You end up doing things that you don't want. You drift further away from the feelings that you wanted to in the beginning. So that's really important to recognize. If you set the goal as in a feeling, as an emotion, then the paths are much more expansive.
I ran this exercise in a corporate setting just a week ago. And there was one guy in the session that had this dream, had this goal of selling out major stadiums. He was a trombone player. He wanted to be part of a band.
Can trombone players sell out major stadiums?
100%. I have no idea. I have literally no idea.
Okay.
I know literally nothing about
the trombone circuit.
Trombone or the industry of the circuit, yes. But what I asked him was like, well, what is that experience that you're envisioning right now? What is it going to give you? What attracts you to that? And he said, well, I really like to create. I like to create the music. I really like the recognition that comes from what I think selling out a stadium would have.
Yeah.
I said, great. So now you know that feeling that you're after. And maybe it doesn't make sense to quit your job right now. Maybe it doesn't make sense to go start a whole new career in an area that you feel like you don't have enough skill in. That said, how do you still go about getting those feelings that you're after?
Yeah.
How do you get the recognition? How do you get that creative energy going? And so then he started to ideate on like, what are the different paths? He thought the only path was I need to go sell out stadiums to get what I want, which is the recognition and the creativity. The reality is no, that's one path of an infinite number of paths. So instead of putting that feeling, that dream on hold, or maybe never getting to it, how can we do that today?
That's right. Recognition you can start to get in any number of ways right now without selling out a stadium. Sure, like I'm not telling you not to go and try and sell out a stadium, but it's like, what's the path on the way there? And recognition can happen right now if you put together a small little performance at a bar in your neighborhood, 10 people, put on a show for them, and you could be recognized immediately, get it recorded on YouTube. So there's like, right, you can actually not have to wait 5 years for that to happen. You can start that now. And that's why when I pose the question of if the next 10 years of your life are going to be the most, and here come the feelings and emotions, the most fulfilling, meaningful, adventurous, energizing, purpose-driven, relationship-rich decade of your life, those are all feelings and emotions. There's so much more flexibility to play with there.
I'm going to steal one of your lines, Dominic, and it's, how do you create a life you want to live into?
That you're excited to live into, no doubt, right? To get like really tangible, I want to share with you 10 questions to ask yourself about the next 10 years. Now, these are going to get kind of heady, right? These are mindful questions that we are using specifically to get you to be in a primed state before you enter into this meditation. And some of these questions may grind your gears to a halt because you don't have an answer for them, maybe because you just haven't considered them before. If you find yourself going blank when I ask these 10 questions, it's all good. Like, do not beat yourself up on it. It just means that you need to plant a seed to be curious about coming back to that question later because it's probably something you haven't considered before.
Yeah. I know when you read these questions to me and these exercises I've done before, I'm like, oh my gosh, like my dreams aren't big enough. Like other people have better dreams and like the competition kicks in and then I feel not as expansive. So that's cool. If that's you, relax, listen to the questions. Don't worry about answering them right now.
Okay, here we go. Question number 1, which financial fear or obsession will you finally resolve? And this one, Brian, is really about many people organize their entire lives around the pursuit of money or the avoidance of money because it's bad or it's evil or they have money issues. By just providing some intentionality around that and like saying, how am I going to get this shit under control and not let it drive my life, can open up a much bigger future for you.
Well, and one of the books that would be referenced most here is Napoleon Hill's
Think and Grow Rich.
The Devil.
Oh,
yeah, okay. not Think and Grow Rich. Napoleon Hill is Outwitting the Devil, where he talks about drift.
Yes.
And he said one of the areas in life that we find ourselves drifting the most often is in the financial areas because it's one of our biggest fears. It's an innate fear we're all born with that we're not going to have enough to survive.
Bingo. Okay. Question number 2, what nagging question about yourself will you finally answer?
Go more on that one.
Yeah. So, you know, those questions of like, do I have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? Right? Like if you've worked your entire life in corporate, do I have what it takes to run that Ironman? Do I have what it takes to be in a committed relationship and like be monogamous in love with my partner and actually have an amazing sex life with one person?
So these are the things that I beat myself up for internally when I don't do them.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Or you avoid them or distract. Yeah. Yeah. So that nagging question, which one will you finally answer with power? Question number 3. Which burdensome relationship will you finally end?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Everyone's
got a list of those.
Right?
Yeah.
Still?
Some.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And these are usually the people that have good reason to be in your life, whether they're a family member and you make the case of, but I can't not talk to this person because they're family, but they drag me down and I resent them and I hate myself every time I walk away spending time with them. Well, there's a chance to
if you don't have a list or you don't know who these people are, think exactly that. When you leave the conversation with someone, are you feeling uplifted and energetic or are you feeling drained?
Or are you married to this person or in a long-term relationship with this person? And like you just, for whatever reason, you feel too afraid to pull the trigger to start over, or maybe there's financial considerations. This is a relationship that's holding you back potentially. Which hero of yours will you finally go out and meet? Right?
You've done a good job of this year.
This year I've started to do that. Yeah. I used to place a big distance between myself and other people who I thought I put on a pedestal. And what I realized is like these people are human beings too. And oftentimes when I've reached out to some folks, it's required a little bit of extra elbow grease. I've found that the gap isn't so far. And it's actually created some life-changing moments. Daryl Davis, the podcast that we did with the black man who's gotten 200 KKK members to give up their robes, was a guy that I reached out to, a hero of mine. And he spent 3 hours with me. It was amazing.
These questions are coming together for me now because the nagging question is, can I handle rejection when I reach out to my heroes?
Yeah.
It's all coming full
right.
circle.
There you go, man. Okay. Number 5. What adventures will you take? What adventures and journeys will you take? I'd encourage you to think beyond just where will you travel, right? Like most people think about just destinations. Like, I haven't gone to Australia yet, or, I would love to go to the Maldives. And that's part of it. But it's again, going back to the feelings of, right? Like, is it pushing your comfort zone and going to a non-English speaking country and seeing if you can like thrive there?
Why do you want to go there?
Right.
What is the experience you're looking to get? Oftentimes when I ask that question, what do you want to experience? The first thing that kicks in is limitations. I don't have time to do this. I don't have money to do this. I'm too old to do this. And so I'd encourage you for these questions, forget the limitations for a second. If you want to travel to Mars and we don't have the technology, right, we're limited from the technology perspective, forget about it because it means something. The fact that you want to go to Mars, maybe you don't do that tomorrow, but it means something. And figuring out what that means is important.
And this is the next decade of your life too. So we may have SpaceX doing regular shuttles on the hour to Mars by the time that happens. And also for those of you who have ever wanted to plan a sabbatical, right? Like this is a big one of how about taking like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, take 3 months off from 20 consecutive years of working? Like how could you plan something like that and maybe make a PR campaign to your corporate employer if that's where you work to take that time off, feel a sense of freedom, empowerment. Question number 6, which places have you never been before? Will you explore? So this is kind of like an offshoot of that last question. So are there places in the world? Have you ever been out of the country? If you've been out of the country, have you gone to non-English speaking countries, other cultures? Would it be cool to, like one of the things that I have on my next 10 years is I would love to go spend some time with the Bushmen, right? Like people who live out in the bush and who still live an indigenous lifestyle and like learning how their cultures and their initiation rituals and how they live off the land, how they respect the land, so fucking different from the way that I've been exposed to my whole life. Like that's something that really resonates.
There's a solid chance that you don't come back to New York if you go do that. And then this podcast is going to feel very different. So
see if I can get them on the podcast.
Great.
Bring the recording equipment. Number 7, which part of your physical health will you master?
Love handles. Am I answering these now?
Would you like
great. Got it. Okay. These aren't
do you have
for
love
me.
handles?
Love handles.
Yeah?
I do. They're horrible. I've had them since I was 10.
No shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really got to work on the tire.
Brian, if you mastered your love handles, what feeling would you have?
Oh, this is great. I would feel free to take my shirt off while I'm running in Central Park. At the beach, I would feel lean and mean. I'd feel sexy.
You feel sexy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mission sexy for Brian. Question 8. Which hidden part of you will you reveal to the world? And this is, something that you and I specialize in right now. And neither one of us ever wanted to talk openly about dick stuff or sexuality, but your path with testicular cancer and chlamydia on the same day, and then mine with Sex Addicts Anonymous, like these hidden parts of ourselves actually was where a lot of our fucking power was locked up. And we were, I think, forced onto the stages to a certain degree. But once we recognized how much of our power was locked up into this, then I think we willingly decided to take this to a bigger stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a question that I continually ask myself. It's like, what am I avoiding? What is the topic I'm not telling myself? What is the topic I'm not telling the world? I think Gary Vee does that. He's got a ton of content out there, but one of his things is like, let people know your insecurities because that reduces their power.
Yeah.
Reduces the power of the insecurity.
That's funny. You just made me think of Eminem in the movie 8 Mile, like the very last freestyle battle scene before he goes up against his main competitor in the championship. All he does during his 90 seconds is just shit out every single one of the things that's wrong with him as Eminem. So he's like, I've taken all of your insults away from you and I've made them more insulting than you could have. And so when the other guy gets on stage, he's got no voice. It's just like over, it's done. He found his power in that. That's like the most powerful part of the movie for him. Question number 9, what challenge that makes you throw up a little in your mouth will you accept? What challenge that makes you throw up a little or maybe a lot will you accept? Something come to your mind here?
Ugh. No, not yet. That's the problem. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you leaving a corporate career, me leaving a corporate career, like to become I'd always wondered the question, like, do I have what it takes, the discipline to like chart my own course, to be my own boss? The idea of that made me throw up a little. The idea of starting a men's group and being the guy who like created content and led a group of 15 other guys made me throw up a little in my mouth because I'm like, who the fuck am I? These guys were my friends just a few moments ago and now I'm the leader. That made me throw up in my mouth a little bit. But every one of those things has allowed me to grow.
Yeah.
Last one, man. What lasting and meaningful dent will you make on the world around you? What lasting and meaningful dent will you make on the world around you?
Yeah, and another way to ask this is like, what contributions do you want to make to the world, to your community, to your family?
Yes.
This one, it's interesting, Dom, because the topics that questions that you asked are partly about us, like our individually us, like what experiences we want to have. I find that people often have a harder time answering that question than they do the question that you just asked, which is, what do you want to contribute? Or what was the word you used?
Yeah. Like, what's the dent that you want to make?
What's the dent that you want to make? Right, right. And it's oftentimes when we start to think about others, this exercise becomes easier. So what do you want to leave? What legacy you want to create? And a great way to determine this, if you don't know what it is, figure out when you're reading the news or listening to the news, what pisses you off? What would you like to change?
Yeah.
That's a good access point.
Yeah, no doubt. And this is the question that a lot of people get hung up on. It's like, oh, I don't have an answer for that, or I'm not passionate about anything, or that passionate about something that I want to dedicate a life's work to. Well, if you're in that place, again, going back to the original counsel I gave you at the beginning of this conversation, don't beat yourself up about it. That just gives you an indicator that you haven't really given the time or space to allow this kind of question to come up, to consider it. 10 years ago, I had no fucking clue what I would have wanted to dedicate my time or energy to. Like that was when I was regularly experiencing the Sunday scaries. At the height of my professional success in the corporate world, that was exactly it at 30 years of age, 10 years ago. And if you were to have asked me, like, what do I want my next 30 years to look like? I had no idea. That's what actually set me into motion around there's got to be a better way. So if you don't have immediate answers to these questions, it's actually kind of a cool place to be, because now you can set that intention of, okay, like I can get curious about this and allow it to unfold over time.
Tim, I know one indicator for me is when I was working in corporate, I didn't have things I necessarily wanted to learn. I knew that the corporate structure was going to put me into situations and have experiences which I would learn, but it wasn't like I had a list somewhere. Now I've got a list of things that I want to learn because I want to put that out and contribute that into the world.
Yep.
Whether it's like public speaking sort of stuff, whether it's something more enjoyable like guitar, whether it's video editing because I want to do some sort of cool content or some sort of cool message. I've got a list of stuff that I couldn't accomplish in the next 5 years, let alone right now.
Yeah.
But it's exciting because I have some dreams associated with each one of those. And so a question I would ask, if I can add an 11th question here, is how do you want to grow?
Yeah.
What do you want to learn?
Yes.
Because that's usually another access point to the experiences that you want to have or the contribution you want to make.
It could be, I want to expand my mental toughness. I want to expand my emotional capacity. I want to become a master of my physiology. I want to learn how to sleep better. I want to learn how to lift more weights. I want to learn how to be a better lover, right? I want to learn how to magnetize women in my life. Or the woman that's already in my life, I want to learn how to create more polarity there, more spontaneous, exciting moments. Like those are all different ways you can answer that question of how do I want to grow? What books are you going to read over the next decade that look different from the last decade's
I'm taking
books?
Jim Quick's speed reading class right now because I want to consume more books. Makes sense.
Okay.
There's my skill.
I want to come back on that to see if speed reading, in my mind, I've always had this thing against speed reading. I'm like, you can't really get into it and retain the information. I also look at reading as something that like I don't want to speed through. Like reading for me is also kind of like a leisure activity in certain places.
What if you could have both?
So I would need you to convince me that that could be possible.
I'll let you know how that goes.
Please.
I'm on episode 3 of 15, so.
Oh, shit. You got
my reading
baby
is
steps.
still normal.
Got it. All right. So here's where we're about to go. We're about to lead you into another guided meditation, except this one is going to be forward projecting. And if you remember the quote that we shared in last week's episode from Bill Gates, kind of a famous guy who knows what he's talking about, we often overestimate what we can do in 1 year. And we often underestimate what we can get done in 10 years. So this is an opportunity to really think big, really envision big, and start with the feelings versus the specific outcomes. Taking this time to settle in, dropping into this present moment, allowing yourself to close your eyes if you haven't already, temporarily disconnecting from all the stimulus of the outside world, recognizing the parts of you that may be a little bit tense in this moment, perhaps giving those parts of you permission to relax. Maybe it's just allowing the shoulders to fall, the jaw to soften, perhaps there are parts of you that are already relaxed and peaceful, and giving yourself permission to allow that relaxation to double and then triple. Giving yourself this time to just be here and now, knowing that your mind will always drift and wander as a mind wants to do, and that is totally okay. And also at any time, you can always bring your attention back to the guidance of my voice. To drop you further into this present moment, I'll be guiding you in 3 elaborate breaths, with your inhales through the nose coming deep from your belly, not just your chest. And the exhale will be twice as long out through the mouth. The exhale twice as long, allowing you to relax even further. Starting with an inhale through the nose. And out through the mouth. Again. Last one. Seeing if you can continue that cadence for a few more breaths. Allowing that exhale to be twice as long, which will calm you down and bring you further into this present moment. And as you continue to breathe, I'd like you to picture yourself standing in a big black room that expands as far as the eye can see into infinity. You are standing in a black room where there's blackness in all directions, north, south, east, west, with nothingness except for you. And then suddenly, appearing in front of you is your very own time machine, which very shortly will be taking you 10 years into the future. But before that happens, I'd like you to take inventory of how you feel about your life right now. How do you feel about your health right now, here, today? How do you feel about your financial situation right now? How do you feel about your work and career right now? How do you feel about your intimate life right now? How do you feel about the relationships in your life right now? How happy are you right now? How lit up by your life are you right now? Taking inventory of all of those awarenesses of the totality of your life right now. And setting the intention for your future that the next 10 years of your life will be the most meaningful, fulfilling, prosperous, energizing, relationship-rich, purpose-driven decade of your life. And carrying that intention as you step towards the time machine, and setting that dial forward 10 years from today. It's time to press that button or pull that lever, and off you go 10 years into the future. You arrive in another big black room with nothingness other than you as far as the eye can see. It is precisely 10 years from today. Perhaps a calendar appears right in front of your face, and you can see that date precisely. How old are you today, now 10 years into the future? And suddenly, a big, giant, full-length mirror appears directly in front of you, and you are face to face with this 10 years older version of you. And you have just had 10 of the most meaningful, fulfilling, prosperous, energizing, relationship-rich, purpose-driven years of your life. What do you see in the reflection in the mirror? How do you look? What energy are you emitting? How does your posture look after having had those magical 10 years? What can you observe about yourself physically and your health as you stare at yourself, this 10 years older version of you in the mirror? How did you live those last 10 years with respect to your physical well-being? And how do you feel about yourself now that you've achieved this? Just as quickly as it appeared, the full-length mirror now vanishes. All of a sudden, people start to populate your space. The relationships of your life that are of the utmost importance to you Who's there? What do they look like? What experiences did you share with them over the last 10 years? Did you break new ground with them? What level of closeness do you feel with them? Who is there? And also, who isn't? Who was a part of your life 10 years ago that is no longer in the picture now? For whatever reason. Perhaps you said goodbye to them because you needed to move on. Perhaps they left the earth. Who is there? Who is not there? Once again, just as quickly as they all appeared, they're now gone. And you're back to standing in this big black room on your own. And in front of you appears a computer screen monitor that pops open to your bank account. And you've just had 10 of the most prosperous years of your life. What number do you see in there? What makes you feel secure, free, proud? And what does that money allow you to do? And what do you own or not own? And looking back over the last 10 years, can you see the changes you made or staying the course that allowed you to get to this place? And how did you do it? Once again, just as quickly as it appeared, the computer monitor disappears. And as you stand there in this big black space, you become aware of the work that you did over the last 10 years with respect to your career. And you had 10 of the most purpose-driven years of your life, directly aligning it with your work. What did you do? Were you already on that path? Or did it take a few years at the beginning of the decade to lay the foundation or change course? But what are you doing now that's lit your soul on fire? then you happen to notice a feeling of fire burning inside of you because your intimate life is on fire. What does that look like for you? You are now living your ideal love life. Of your own design, however you want. Who's there with you? What's that chemistry like? What feelings do you feel? What feelings do you feel in your body and in your heart? And with who? And now, bringing those thoughts to a close, doing one final inventory of all the awareness and all of the experiences that you just had of this beautiful date 10 years into the future, and taking them with you as the time machine reappears, ready to bring you back. Doing one final sweep of this space, making sure you've got everything you need to make that future date a reality, and stepping back into that time machine, bringing it back to the present moment, pushing that button or pulling that lever, and off you go, arriving back here today, now. This time with all of the gifts from that future date 10 years in the future, bringing that desire and that clarity and all of the questions back with you. Most importantly, hanging on to the desire for that future state to become your reality. And making a commitment right now to taking action towards that future state. What will you do today to make that possible? What will you do this week to make that possible? What will you do over the next 30 days to make that possible? What will you do over the next year to make that day 10 years in the future possible? Perhaps even committing to write this down in a journal or on a piece of paper or on your phone, the reflections from this exercise. Taking a deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Again. last one. Bringing awareness back into your body. Perhaps rubbing your legs with your hands, wiggling your fingers and your toes. Taking as much time as you possibly need to bring yourself back into the present moment. Preparing yourself to design the next decade of your life. And whenever you are ready, you can open your eyes. Hey, thanks for listening to the Man Amongst Men podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you want more access to tools and resources, and you want information on our upcoming live events and retreats, head on over to www.doinnerwork.com.